Hi everyone, it's Lauren and welcome to part one of my May wrap-up where I'm going to be reviewing all of the books that I've read so far this month. The first book I have to talk to you about today is The Trick to Time by Kit de Wall. Now this book was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. It was not shortlisted. And having read it, to be honest, I'm surprised it was longlisted at all. I've seen a lot of people who have really enjoyed this book. But I really wasn't a fan, and I say that as someone who really enjoyed Kit de Wall's first book, My Name is Leon. I absolutely loved it, but this just left a little too much to be desired, in my opinion. This is about a woman called Mona, who is from Ireland and she's living in the UK now, and when we meet her we learn that she's just about to turn 60 and that she makes dolls for a living, or there's a carpenter who makes dolls for her and she makes the outfits for them. And not only does she make dolls that people want just for collections from orders from abroad, but she also makes specific custom-made babies to help people who have suffered a stillbirth. And then running concurrently with the present day, we also have Mona's story, so we go back to her childhood and then her growing up and meeting her husband, and we have the threads coming together to see how she got to where she is in the present day. Now, I loved the idea of the making of the dolls, and I was really interested in Mona in the present day. To be honest, I felt like there was just too much going on in this book, and there were too many threads of Mona's past. When we went back to her past and her meeting her husband, I just didn't care. And I think the real issue with this book is that there's a massive twist in here, and there's lots of kind of revelations of what's been going on in her past. And I feel like the book really didn't focus on the really important pieces of information. And because of that, I just didn't feel like I got emotionally invested in any of the characters, really. There's a lot of stuff with Mona and her dad and her mum back in Ireland, and there's kind of a whole emotional story happening there. And then there's the relationship between her and her husband and their ups and downs and her husband's family. But, you know, there was too much going on there. And then her now with her friend Val and kind of what's going on in her present, and she's meeting this new man. But it was just too many threads of narrative, and I just didn't feel like I cared about any of them, really. I felt like we didn't spend enough time with each of these characters. There was also a kind of big reveal right in the last page of a twist, which I felt like was really obvious. So again, maybe that numbed me to the emotional experience of the book, but I was really disappointed in it. So I have not watched anybody else's reviews of this book yet, because I just wanted to say what I thought without feeling like I'd been influenced by anybody else. So I would actually like to discuss it with other people who liked this book now that I've done my review, because I just don't really get it. The next book I read, luckily, I liked very much indeed, and that is Sing Unburied Sing by Jesmyn Ward, and this has been shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction, and I think it might be one of my favourites on the shortlist that I've read, actually. I think it's very impressive. This story is mainly told from two perspectives. Firstly, we have Jojo, who is a 13-year-old mixed-race boy in the US, and we also hear from his mother, Leonie, as well. And the main plot arc of the book is Leonie and Jojo and his little sister Kayla and Leonie's friend Misty are going on a long car journey to go and pick up Jojo's father, Michael, who has been in prison. But hanging off of that narrative is all of their own internal histories and stories. We get a lot of perspective from Jojo's grandparents and their own histories and what they've gone through in their lives. And it's really a look at everybody being haunted by their past and being trapped by their past and emotions and not being able to break free from the cycle that they're going down. So this car journey in itself is very claustrophobic and suffocating, especially for the children. And then when you hear from Leonie's perspective, you learn that she is struggling with a drug addiction and really a kind of a very obsessive love with Michael, because they got together when they were very young. She's still reeling from grief of her younger brother who died when they were teenagers. And what I really enjoyed about this novel, despite the fact that it's very well written and the prose is so lyrical and beautiful, but I really felt a sense of Jojo and Leonie being their own complete characters. And Jojo's perspective on his mum is full of anger, and he hates her because he doesn't feel like she's a very good parent. He feels a lot closer to his grandparents, and he really is taking in charge of looking after Kayla a lot of the time. But then hearing from Leonie's perspective, you do kind of empathise with her, even though she is technically a bad mother. You see that there is love there. And one part of the book that I really enjoyed is when Kayla is not very well, and Leonie is trying to find a cure for her sickness, her car sickness, and she's remembering all of the magical remedies and the plant lore and the herbs that her mother taught her. And you can see that she has so much respect for her mother and how good a mother she was to her, and she kind of has this different perception of herself as a parent, and she thinks that she can then replicate that and do that for her children, but she is incapable of doing that because she doesn't actually have the knowledge that her mother did. And she's so successful in writing these characters that it does enable you to, if not completely empathise and sympathise with every single person in this family, you at least really understand their motivations and where they're coming from and all of the different tragedies that they are personally dealing with. But then she also takes you out of not just these characters' own personal pain and their personal grief, and she's able to make a much wider point of the pain and the horrors of racism in the South and the kind of histories experienced by Jojo's grandfather and all of the histories of people who have gone through torments and tortures because of their race. And she uses magical realism and some kind of theoretical and literal ghosts in here, but it never feels like it goes too far. And when the magical realism occurs, you just kind of go with it, even though you're not really expecting it, and it seems like a very naturalistic novel at first, but it just builds so beautifully, and you just really get a sense of the large scale and the personal scale, like within this one family. So I just think it's so skillfully done, and it's the kind of thing where I didn't really realise how much I was enjoying the book while I was reading it. I was interested and I was thinking, yeah, this is fine. I'd gone through a kind of run of books that I didn't really enjoy before picking this one up, but then I found myself like not wanting to get off the train at my stop because I was just really into it, even though it's only about a car journey, seemingly there's not this rip-roaring plot. But I was really sucked in with these characters and I really enjoyed the reading process, even though some of what you're reading is quite harrowing. So I would absolutely recommend this. And thinking about it, actually, the other books on the Women's Prize shortlist that I've read so far, I do feel like this is the most skillfully accomplished. Like while you're reading it, it just feels effortless, even though she's managed to pack so much in there. And finally, we have a little book of essays, and that is Men Explain Things to Me by Rebecca Solnit. This is about maybe 5 or 6 essays. All of them have been published before, and the title essay, Men Explain Things to Me, is the essay from which was derived the term mansplaining. She doesn't actually use it in this essay herself, but it was talking about her own personal experience of meeting a man at a party, at an event, where he tried to tell her about a book that she had written herself, and he was going off and off about this book, and she's like, yeah, that's my book, I wrote that, I'm an expert in that field. And that's where this all took off from. This is my first time reading Rebecca Solnit. I've heard amazing things about her writing, and this was fine. I don't really know how else to explain it. I think the problem with this collection, for me personally, is that a lot of these essays were written in 2013, in 2009. It says when they were published in here, but some of them are just so current and they're talking about things in the news, such as the assault by Dominique Strauss-Kahn of a woman working in his hotel and the subsequent case that followed that. And it's not to say that what she's talking about in these essays aren't still relevant, but I think because they were written at the time and they were reactionary, it feels like as a reader you're meant to understand exactly what event she's talking about, and 5-6 years later sometimes I've forgotten details. And that's not to talk badly of the work itself, it's just that this collection perhaps is not as groundbreaking as each of these essays individually would have been when they were first published. There is one essay in here called Grandmother Spider, talking about women in art, and just women everywhere really, and how they are kind of erased. And that was my favourite essay in here by far, and it did sort of feel timeless because she wasn't talking about current events as such in that particular essay. So I would say if you're interested in reading feminist essays in general, if you're interested in reading this specific essay, Men Explain Things to Me, and understand kind of the history of but I guess understand some of the movements and some of the terms in feminism over the last few years, then this is quite an interesting starting point, and kind of see what people were writing only a few years ago. But if you are familiar with feminist thought, or current feminist thought anyway, then these might seem a little bit outdated to you. So it's not like required reading, I would say, but still very, very good. So that's it so far this month. I thought I would spend slightly longer talking about the books I read, since there was only 3 of them, rather than do a very short video. I thought I'd get into a little bit more depth, so I hope that was interesting for you. Let me know what you've been reading in May so far, and also let me know if you've read any of these, if you have any opinions on them. I'd love to have a chat with you in the comments, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!